You might expect that it would be impossible to read the minds of champion Scrabble players like Nigel Richards or Josh Sokol. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Players that good are actually the best candidates for mind reading. For example, let's say you're playing Nigel Richards. He opens the game with new for 22 points. What can you conclude about his remaining 3 tiles? Well, if he had an A or an O, he surely would have played Gnaw or Woken for 10 extra points. If he had an I, he would have been much likelier to play Wink than New to avoid drawing a duplicate I from the bag. If he had a U, he'd probably have tried to play it if at all possible, because the U is the worst vowel. So, because the 3 tiles remaining on his rack are less likely to be an A, I, O, or U, you can deduce that his next rack is much likelier than usual to be consonant heavy, and plan accordingly. This technique is known as inference. It's not as useful against less experienced players who will often miss some of the options available to them. Scrabble is a tough game, after all. Against grandmaster players, inference becomes increasingly important. And because a player like Nigel Richards finds his best plays with machine-like precision, every move he makes can be a valuable clue about what letters he has or doesn't have. The game I'm about to show you between Nigel Richards and Josh Sokol from the 2014 National Championship is a great showcase of inference-based adjustments and counter-adjustments. Josh draws too many consonants to start the game and exchanges 3 of them, leaving Q-U-S-T. Normally, the Q is a danger to be avoided. Here, with some great tiles to surround it, it's well worth keeping. Nigel plays Rethink with the first blank for 86 points to grab a big early lead. Josh draws the dreadful O-O-O and plays Quit for 33. Even though he keeps all of his O's, this is the highest scoring move he can make while also keeping his valuable S, which now forms 2 heavy hooks. Nigel blocks the more dangerous hook with Probe for 33, and Josh answers with Uzo for 23, setting up another good S hook and inching closer to a balanced rack. Here, Nigel makes an amazing play of Jib for 37, making use of the big J spot. He could play Job there instead, so why Jib? Well, notice the spot Jib creates atop the I. If Josh plays through the B with an I or a U, he'll unwittingly be setting Nigel up for a 50-point X-bomb. Not only that, by keeping the D and O on his rack, Nigel will have an opportunity on his next move to play Dojo to renew the setup if Josh plays down from the B. In Josh's commentary on this game, he writes that he immediately detected the increased likelihood that Nigel had the X, reasoning that with Jab, Job, and Jib all playable in that spot, along with a slew of other possible J plays, Jib would often be a conscious choice by Nigel to create that dangerous spot with an X in hand to capitalize. That is awesome recognition on Josh's part, and he was exactly right. So Josh plays Boo to use up the triple without giving Nigel a chance to use his X, and Nigel follows through on his plan by playing Dojo. He could play Toxoid instead, but keep in mind that Josh started this game with a 3-tile exchange and went on to play 3 tiles, 3 tiles, and just 2 tiles on his next few moves. If he wasn't happy with the tiles left on his rack, he almost certainly would have played more tiles on those turns. And one of the tiles Scrabble players are happiest to keep is the S. Nigel is thinking that if Josh has a bingo ending in S, playing Toxoid would make it hit much harder. And after Dojo, if Josh bingo's hooking Rethinks instead, he'll remain ahead by 60 or more points after he cashes in his X. After Dojo, Josh doesn't have a bingo to play, and while he can be nearly completely certain that Nigel has the X, he has no adequate way of blocking that won't set him even further back on the scoreboard. So he responds with a very clever play of Quell, setting up his S aggressively along the triple lane. This play blocks the S hook on Rethink, but if Josh does manage to draw a bingo hooking Quells, it'll hit even harder, which he needs to get back in this game. Nigel draws WW and can finally cash his 50-point X play, but instead he plays twirl to cripple the quells hook. He already suspects Josh might have an S, but after an aggressive setup like quell, it's almost a lock. Also, Josh chose to play quell when similar options of quill and quoll would have been playable in the same spot. For these reasons, Nigel knows it's far likelier than usual that Josh has the strong ES combination on his rack, and maybe even powerful 3-tile combinations like ERS or ESS. Blocking the big S hook and saving his X play for the future makes a lot of sense. Still, this is exactly what Josh hoped to see, as his diversion pays off and buys him time to block the X spot, which he does with SOP. Several turns later, Josh draws the second blank and bingos with his highest scoring play of Enraged, and after Nigel's response of Haul, Josh immediately draws a second bingo of Fanciest to surge into the lead in a game which he trailed by over 100 points. After Nigel's play of Dixit through the X, Josh is up by only 10, and he has a few things to worry about. The unseen tiles are quite good for playing bingos, and there are bingo spots in different areas of the board. Formica also might have 2-tile extensions, which Nigel will know for sure and Josh may not. And there's also the 51-point rethinking extension, which could be a game changer too. So Josh wisely elects to play Stow-Eye, hooking quells, blocking rethinking and the S of jives, and essentially forcing Nigel to have bingos in the upper left quadrant of the board if he wants to win. Unfortunately for Josh, that's exactly what happens, as Nigel bingos with Nearlier for 62. Josh briefly retakes the lead with his best endgame move of Jim, but Nigel plays out with Ada to win this thrilling game 437 to 426. Whenever two really strong players like this face off, inference adds a fun extra layer of complexity to every decision, with both players trying to pick up on the clues left behind by their opponent. So if you ever find yourself across the board from Scrabble Grandmasters, try reading their minds. They kind of want you to.